Tonight, child prostitution is booming in America.
Well, these are kids, okay? These are kids that are 10, 12, 13, 14 years old. It happens every single day, every day.
Portland, Oregon is one of a growing number of hubs for children forced into the sex trade.
You need a lot of product when you have that many buyers coming to shop, and that's what Portland has become, a place for people to shop for the innocence of children of our nation.
A special report into sex trafficking and children.
I would have never thought that I would have been in this situation. I would have never thought that I would have sold myself for any other person.
We'll bring you the news tonight on Dan Rather Report. Good evening. Our report tonight may make you uneasy or uncomfortable, but it's a story that needs to be told. Each year, hundreds of thousands of adolescents are manipulated and even forced into America's illegal sex trade. It's considered by many to be modern-day slavery, and it's happening big time in a lot of places in this country, including in a city you might not expect, Portland, Oregon. As we found in our investigation, a small team of vice and patrol officers in Portland is working around the clock attempting to rescue hundreds of teenage girls who are the vulnerable victims of sex trafficking. Surrounded by rivers and majestic mountains, the picturesque city of Portland, Oregon is often referred to as a model American city. It is one of the most environmentally friendly or green cities in the United States. There are more open spaces in Portland than any other U.S. city. It's been voted one of America's most livable cities. Portland also offers clean, quiet, and energy-efficient public transportation to every corner of the city. But there is another side to Portland, a seedier side. The city has more strip clubs per capita than Las Vegas. And with all nude shows and numerous sex stores, Portland has been dubbed Pornland. It's not surprising that where you find strip clubs and sex stores, you'll most likely find prostitutes. But what is surprising is that this model city is becoming a major center for child trafficking, juveniles being forced into selling their bodies.
It is out of control problem. It is unbelievable. I've only done this job 3 years in the Vice. I've been a cop for 29. If you'd have told me 3 years ago that a 14-year-old girl would go to a food court, meet a guy, and 3 hours later be selling herself, I'd have said, no frickin' way. It happens every single day. Every day.
Sergeant Doug Justice heads the Portland Police's Vice Detail, which investigates all prostitution cases in the city. He thought he'd seen just about everything. For the last 3 decades, he worked up the ranks, from a patrolman to undercover narcotics officer to homicide detective and then sergeant. In 2008, he was promoted to head Portland's Vice Detail.
Well, these are kids, okay? These are kids that are 10, 12, 13, 14 years old. It is the most troubling job I've ever done in police work. It drives me crazy. It keeps me awake at night. It kills me that these little kids are getting out here getting raped.
Well, why Portland? I mean, I'm puzzled.
Well, Portland's a very liberal city. You know, the big thing here is keep Portland weird. I don't know. You know, I really don't know. I just know that we are very liberal and we let things go, and we shouldn't. All right, this is the Dancing Bear, right here.
Sergeant Justice showed us some of the seedier sides of Portland. It's where sex can be bought on the street or in a store. It's a city where zoning is unrestricted. Here, a grade school is just across the street from a so-called adult entertainment store. It's a city where strip mall has a whole different meaning, like here at Town Plaza.
And this entire place is in some sort of exotic strip. It's got a Video Visions that sells, you know, X-rated movies. Then they've got a dance thing in there, and then they've got this, the Sugar Shack juice bar. And then you go in there, and they've got little rooms with curtains on them. You can go in there and have sex.
So the town plaza is basically a sex plaza?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
I'd like to think I have a fair number of road miles on me, but I don't know I've ever seen, in effect, a strip mall dedicated completely to sex.
That's it.
Another reason that child prostitution has a foothold here is that Portland is a major transit hub. There's the port, freight rail, and an extensive highway system. Interstate 5 stretches north to Washington State and south to California. Other highways lead to Nevada and Arizona. Easy transit means easy trafficking, as girls are moved from place to place to keep up with growing demand.
It's basically the same avenues that the cartel brings their drugs in. Okay? It's a product. You can take these kids up and down the state, they use the same areas, they know the same connects, and they start selling them.
And many of them are sold here.
This is 82nd Avenue. To the untrained eye, it looks like any busy thoroughfare in America. But it's a hotspot for underage prostitution in Portland.
I would say the street's mostly business, but right off of the main avenue is a lot of residential.
And a place where you'll often find officers Jen Hertzler and Josh Howry, one of only 2 teams of Portland police officers assigned to prostitution patrol to combat the sex trade.
Portland's almost a mecca for prostitution. Prostitutes and their pimps travel through Portland on a circuit. I think a lot of people that have lived here, if they don't live on 82nd or around 82nd, realize that some of the women walking up and down the street are prostitutes.
She's young.
She's really young.
They spot a girl who they think may be a streetwalker. She's young, alone, and walking down 82nd Avenue. And for the prostitution patrol, that's 3 strikes.
Hi! Where are you going? It does matter. Are you loitering on our streets?
No.
Where are you from?
Here. Okay, you know what? I don't want to talk to you guys. I didn't do anything wrong. So
You missed a date back there. That guy pulled over for you.
No, he didn't.
How old are you?
know?
How old are you?
See, no cars.
How old are you?
I'm legal.
Legal for what?
She may look young, but she's tough. And the officers know they have to often take a tough stance to break through to hardened streetwalkers. This young woman is so bold as to call 911 to try to get the officers to quit, as she says, harassing her.
So what are you guys doing following me?
Did you just call 911?
Yes, I did.
You're under arrest. Stop.
For what?
Misuse of 911.
What do you guys
2951.
harass me this whole time?
Ma'am, it's not okay to call 911 for a non-emergency. May I see your ID, please?
Okay. I didn't.
Have you ever been arrested?
This year, probably.
What for?
Assault.
Assault?
Yes.
Anything else?
No.
Are you back in contact with Charles?
No. He's still in jail. So.
He was your pimp in 2004, right?
Yes. But that was.
So you do have a history of prostitution then?
Yeah.
So you know what goes on out here,
Yeah,
right?
I do.
So-
That's why.
After checking out her ID, it seems that she was already in the system for prostitution when she was only 14 years old, working for a pimp named Charles. But there will be no arrest. The officer's tone suddenly changes. The Portland Vice Team and prostitution patrols see women like this as victims who must be helped, not locked up.
I'm worried that you're walking 82nd again.
No,
Okay.
That's not the case.
I'm worried that maybe somebody's helping you do this,
No,
putting it in your head again,
No.
taking advantage of you again,
No.
intimidating you again.
No.
It's not the case?
No, not at all. No one.
There's money and there's resources available to you if you find yourself in a bad position.
Yeah,
You understand
I
that?
know.
All right.
Okay.
Trust that you'll call them if you need it.
Alrighty.
Bye-bye.
Sergeant Justice says the children being sold for sex in Portland come from every walk of life. In the past, it's been primarily runaways, but more and more, he says, he's seeing middle economic class girls from suburbs surrounding Portland.
What we're seeing more and more nowadays, it's the girl from Beaverton, from Tigard, from Estacada, from Vancouver, Washington. Parents both work, or maybe a single parent.
You're not telling me, are you, that girls from what we call middle economic class and above get roped into this?
Oh, yes, they do. Every day.
And that brings us to the story of Sue and Ron. They don't want to use their last name, but they were willing to share their nightmare. The Oregon natives married 25 years ago. They never imagined that their only daughter would get roped into the sex trade, but she did when she was 16 years old. Many people think of child prostitution and think, well, it's runaways, immigrants, abused children. Did you think that before your daughter got into this?
Yes, I did. You never think it's going to be right here in your own home.
Well, tell me what happened, how it happened, and why it happened.
She met a boy at school who made friends with her. He had a cousin who he introduced her to. That cousin befriended her, made her think he was her boyfriend. He had other girls that he had used, and he had done this to other girls before. He knew what he was doing. He actually courted her. He came to our house, sat and watched TV and did that type of thing, made her think that he cared about her. She actually felt like she loved him.
And Justice says what happened to Sue's daughter was a classic move out of the pimp playbook. It's called recruiting, and it's followed by breaking and then maintaining a girl.
You recruit them, it's the soft sell. Takes her out and buys her clothes, takes her to dinner, shows her all this great stuff he can do, all this freedom they can have, all this great times. I'm the greatest guy in the world. Everybody screwed up but us. I see your point. Just treat them like a princess, right?
Justice knows the ritual all too well. The girls you're about to meet have all been rescued by Sergeant Justice and his team. This is a young woman we'll call Lauren, who initially enjoyed the compliments she received from the young men she met at a local mall.
In the beginning, I liked it. I liked the attention. I liked how they made me feel, how they talked to me. I guess it made me feel wanted, because at school people would make fun of me and tell me how I was ugly and stuff.
Lauren was an 11-year-old middle school student in Portland. She was a cheerleader, a member of the chess team, and played basketball. One of the boys in particular began showering her with gifts.
He bought me a phone and said he just wanted to keep in touch with me. Talked about how pretty I was and how he wanted me. And
he used to compliment me all the time and tell me how beautiful I was.
And then there's the story of a girl we'll call Michelle. She's from a tight-knit working-class family in Portland. She was 16 when she met a boy through a friend. Her family didn't approve of him, which led to many arguments.
He used to tell me all the time, oh, your family doesn't really love you, because if they really loved you, then they would let you do what you want and this and that, and they don't really care about you because they're always arguing with you, yelling at you.
They get in a pissing match with their mom, right? And the mom says, you can't go out, you gotta be home by 10, and you have to do all your homework. And there's this good-looking, smooth-talking guy, and she's all upset because her mom said, you gotta do this, clean your room, and he's going, baby, you come with me, no problems.
At first I was like, no, that's not true at all, because my family really does love me. And then, I guess you could call it, I started to get a little brainwashed, and he was really controlling.
That's how it is. They soft sell them. They get them a little bit away from their parents. They get them away from their friends. They get their phone away. They put their phone in their back pocket. You can't get this back now. I've spent this money on you. And then they break them.
Sue didn't like the young man her daughter brought home, but at the time she didn't realize her daughter was in danger. You said that he came to the house, sat with the family, did what boyfriends are supposed to do.
In the very beginning, until he knew I was onto him. Because I looked him in the face one day and I told him, if you ever hurt her, you will be sorry. I will make you pay. And he just gave me this smirky little grin, like it was all a game to him. And that was when he quit coming over to our house. He actually got her to move out of our home. She ended up living in a car with him. Then it was, oh baby, we need money. we don't have any money, and he got her prostituting that way.
And that's what happened to Michelle.
Like, he suggested it, and I said, you know, I shrugged my shoulders and said, no, I don't, you know, I'm not going to do that. But then he kind of suggested it a little bit more.
And then they go to a party, and then their buddies come over, and then their buddies have sex with them. And then they get him, hey, look, you had sex with these guys, and that wasn't that big a deal, was it? Oh, not that bad. Well, you know what? We can make a lot of money if you do this.
He forced me to do stuff with his friends, sexual stuff. It casually kind of went on to, if you loved me, you know, you'd take money, you know, you'd get me some money, and I'll be your boyfriend if you do this.
Because he told me, well, if you loved me, you would do a lot for me. So that's kind of what convinced me, I guess. I wanted to show him how much I loved him.
So how many underage young people are involved in sex trafficking in Portland? Justice says it's impossible to say other than it's a lot. He says he knows he sees more young faces all the time. The young women's boyfriends suddenly one night become their boss. The underage girls realize their life is in danger if they try to get out. Once the pimp has broken their spirit, there's no turning back.
And they all tell you that first time they have the sex that they get paid for, they've got them. Because now they can say, you want to go home? I'll tell your parents you're a whore. You're out having sex. In your school, I know the principal. I'll go by and tell him. And these cops, they're not going to arrest me. You're the criminal. And they just maintain that pressure on them the whole time. You can't leave me. If you leave me, I'll go kill your little brother. I'll go burn your house down. I'll find you. There's nowhere you can go.
He abused her. I know she told me several times that there were times where she was actually afraid to go to sleep for fear of what he would do to her while she was sleeping. I know that she saw other girls that were abused terribly. I know that she saw times like where she'd either see on the news or she'd see in the paper that either pimps or girls had been killed.
I was hit a couple times for not bringing back enough, for talking back. You're always supposed to bring back more than 100. Well, I was at least. I don't know about other girls.
Between me and my boyfriend at the time, there was a lot of violence. Like I said, black eyes. He used to choke me all the time. I guess you could call, he got a little bit smarter and started punching me in my stomach so I wouldn't have any visible bruises. I would have never thought that I would have been in this situation. I would have never thought that I would have sold myself for any other person. I would have never thought that I would have let myself be treated as badly as I was being treated by him. You know, I just went crazy. I wanted to let him know how much I loved him.
And then there's a young woman we'll call Brianna. She too comes from a middle-class background. Her parents were divorced, she was unhappy, and began hanging out with what she admits now was a bad crowd. She ended up under the control of a pimp with a gun.
He never hurt me with the gun. He would show it to us and tell us that his gun was his best friend. He would slap from time to time. A lot of the times he would just switch up. Sometimes he would be nice and take us shopping. Other times he would hit us and tell us to work and won't let us come back in the house. It's all about how much money you make and how much money you're bringing to them.
He would want to go and act like we had a lot of money, so we'd go to, you know, Red Lobster or Olive Garden. You know, he'd want to buy the expensive alcohol, cars. And cars, when you have a car, you got to pay for gas, and gas is not that cheap anymore. So I made a lot of money for him, and he just wasted it. I don't have anything to show for it but a pair of shoes.
An average pimp with one kid will make between $800 and $1,000 a day. That's 7 days a week, 30 days in a month.
And not much overhead.
no overhead. You get a cheap hotel for $50 a night, a bottle of booze, you take her to Taco Bell or McDonald's, something, cheap food, you buy her some clothes, and that's it. Here we go. Here's a pimp daddy right here.
Some of the pimps are teenagers themselves. According to Justice, pimps keep all the money and leave the girls with nothing. It's a lucrative business, and one that is creating a new business model. Young gang members who used to compete for drug turf are working together now to sell girls. They've even formed a new gang of sorts, named after a crude expression, MOB.
Well, we've been hearing a lot about this gang, MOB. What is MOB? What can you tell me about
Money over bitches.
And who are they? What do they do?
They're a gang that could be a Crip, could be a Blood, could be an unthanked hustler, could be whatever. They kind of like don't worry about too much crossing over because it's women, it's not drugs, and they'll cooperate, they'll trade a girl here and there. But it's a loose-knit group that goes up and down the state here and in Washington and California, and they sell women for money.
And it's not just the young pimps. Old-time gang members have found that peddling young prostitutes is easier and more profitable than drugs.
It's the gang members that went to jail in the 80s and 90s that got busted. And the federal government made it tougher on drugs, smaller amounts. If it was crack, you went to prison. They cracked down the gangs.
Well, we had the war on drugs.
Right. So now they come out. I just spent 10 years for selling crack. Okay, and there's how many? Around the Portland area alone, there's probably 50 drug investigators in different groups. City of Portland, there's 2 vice investigators.
Wait a minute. There are 50 investigating drugs and 2
Yes.
on this subject?
Right.
How can that be?
I'm not a politician, I'm just a cop. But if I'm a criminal and I got busted for drugs and there's a regional task force over here and there's another task force over there and every city has a drug investigator at least, and then I know that there's 2 vice investigators in the city of Portland, let me think. I think I'll sell women, because what are the chances of me getting caught?
This is organized crime. Not mafia, not La Cosa Nostra, not what people think of traditionally as organized crime, but organized crime in that these kids are part of a network. They're moved from community to community.
Ernie Allen is the co-founder and current CEO of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It's a unique nonprofit organization mandated by Congress in 1984 to work with federal agencies to find missing children and tackle the problem of child sexual exploitation.
Our estimate is that there are at least 100,000 American kids a year who get caught up in this insidious activity, and their estimates far more aggressive than that, typically 100,000 to 300,000 kids a year. So this is not a modest problem.
And that's especially true of Portland, which is gaining national attention as a major hub for child trafficking. Last year, during a nationwide sting conducted by federal, state, and local law enforcement officials called Operation Cross Country, Portland had the second highest number of arrests and rescues in the country. And a recent report by a state attorney general noted that Portland was one of the top 3 cities in the U.S. for the number of arrests, investigations, and rescues of underage sex trafficking victims. The other cities were Miami and Las Vegas.
What are the chances, or do you think there are any chances, that we in the press and you who work with this on an hour-by-hour basis are overstating it? Because I run across people who say, well, listen, I haven't really think about this. I haven't seen anything about this. Can't be that big a problem.
Well, I think the chances that we're overstating it are minuscule. I had a police officer say to me once that the only way not to find this problem in any community is simply not to look for it.
Ernie Allen. Now, up next, the internet, children, and the marketing of sex.
Missed an edition of Dan Rather Reports? Or just want to see one again? We're now available on iTunes, so check us out.
Welcome back.
As you've seen, Portland has a small but determined vice squad led by Sergeant Doug Justice to fight the trafficking of children. But the problem is much bigger than one officer in one city. Politicians and child advocates are taking notice, and one of the most vocal is just across the state line in Washington. Travel up Interstate 5. Over the bridge from Portland is Vancouver, Washington, a bedroom community that's getting a vivid lesson in what's happening in their own backyard.
She was turned. She went from a little girl to someone that a lot of things happened to, and as they happened to her.
Linda Smith is a former Republican congresswoman from southern Washington who is holding a training session with regional law enforcement, criminal justice, and social services professionals about the issue of child trafficking.
We've trained over 7,000 first responders, law enforcement in the United States, I don't know how many more, in just the last few months.
While in Congress, Smith became interested in the issue of international child trafficking. She started a nonprofit called Shared Hope International with the mission of rescuing and rehabilitating child prostitutes. This is one of their undercover videos.
But I'm going to tell you something. If you pay the price, you can get what you want. I can get it for you. Really? Now, if you want something really young, that $200 it just costs a little more than that.
Sure.
But how young you talking? Talk to me.
Well, how young do you have?
Well, I don't have nothing younger than 14.
Okay, no, 14 is good.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, you're going to have to add something to that.
Sure.
And once I figured out just how bad it was, we analyzed several parts of the nation for the Department of Justice and put it all together and started looking at it. I decided that most people wouldn't believe it.
And when Smith started digging, she realized that it was happening in Portland, a few miles from her own hometown.
There's a lot of buyers that come to Portland because there's like 160 commercial sex venues that are in a magazine that you can get. I hate to tell people about that, but you can actually have just a holiday of going place to place, ordering girls, going to strip clubs, back rooms, and have 2 or 3 girls brought to the side room in Portland. You need a lot of product when you have that many buyers coming to shop, and that's what Portland has become, a place for people to shop for the innocence of children of our nation.
The problem goes far beyond Portland. Police all across the country are not only fighting a growing wave of traditional sex trafficking, but the popularity of classified advertising on the internet has also created an easy, inexpensive, and secretive way to sell young children. And one of the most well-known marketplaces for selling sex on the internet is classified giant Craigslist. Here's what happened to the young woman we're calling Brianna.
I met this guy and he said, "Would you want to make some money?" And I said, "Sure." I went with him to his house and he told me to take off my clothes, and he took a picture of me. He didn't show my face, and he posted it on Craigslist.
Suddenly, her services were being peddled to anyone with an internet connection, and the cost of the ad was little more than a couple of cups of coffee.
Back then it was $5. Paid for it on his credit card. Next thing I knew, he clicked post ad, and he put my name and my age. Not my real name, just looked like a fake name. And then the phone started ringing.
Brianna wasn't alone. At any hour on any day, there are hundreds of ads for services in Portland like massage and other code words for sex. And the pictures make clear most of the offerings are for very young women. Portland detective Megan Burkeen, who works with Sergeant Doug Justice, showed us some other online classified sites where pimps sell their girls.
As I understand it, there are underage girls on this?
Yes. A lot of the pimps will post their girls that are working for them on Craigslist. And there's not just Craigslist. I mean, there's the TNA review board. There's Backpage, which is also open to the public. So I just type in Backpage. So it's another website just like Craigslist. And the thing about TNA board, which makes it a little different than the other websites, is that Johns will go on there and review the girl that they had, and they'll recommend that girl to other Johns. Like, I had so-and-so, she was great.
According to Ernie Allen and those who track child sex trafficking, companies like Craigslist are now on the radar of elected officials.
It's why about a year and a half ago, the National Center and 43 state attorneys general entered into an agreement with Craigslist because what we were finding is that these kids were being advertised for sex
on Craigslist
and other sites. Craigslist agreed to take steps. They agreed to require identifying information in the use of a credit card before anybody could submit an ad, so at least we can then determine who posted the ad. They agreed to work more closely with law enforcement. They agreed ultimately to shut down what they call their erotic services section.
And Craigslist also promised to give the revenue from the erotic ads to charity. It was a short-lived promise. In May of 2009, Craigslist replaced their erotic section with an adult services section, which critics said was exactly the same. We asked Craigslist for comment. They told us that they were never obliged to donate to charity. They further noted that, quote, after fulfilling an earlier pledge for which Craigslist was criticized, we announced in May of 2009 that Craigslist would be making no further public pledges in connection with its charitable giving programs. End quote. The AIM Group estimates adult advertisements on Craigslist will haul in more than $36 million this year. Craigslist did not deny the estimate, but clearly stated to us that, quote, any of the figures being thrown around by Craigslist analysts are positively dwarfed by the adult ad revenue at the large internet companies, media conglomerates, newspaper chains, and telephone companies. End quote.
Is this or is this not? And to ask the question is not to suggest I know the answer. A case of you're kind of running an electronic house of ill repute that has children in it, and you say, but if you catch any of our people doing it, we'll be happy to take them out of the house.
That's exactly right. We had a case in which we'd been searching for a little girl reported missing for 3 years. One of our analysts found her picture on Craigslist being advertised for sex. She was 15 years old. We worked with the task force in that community. When they went into the place where the child was being held, she had a 1-year-old infant. There was one piece of furniture in this room. It was a couch. The baby was sleeping on a cushion from the couch on the floor. The girl was sleeping on the remainder of the couch and was being taken out to service her clients several times a day. Now, that's what I mean by 21st century slavery.
But in many cases, young women and girls are doing it right under their parents' noses. Brianna needed only a cell phone.
It's very easy to hide being a prostitute, whether you're living in your mom's house or your dad's house or your grandparents. It's kind of like the phone call type thing. Your phone is always ringing, so you take phone calls and they never just show up to your house because they don't know where you live, or you would tell them, meet me down the street over at the hotel, or, you know, it's you can hide it very good.
Brianna eventually dropped out of school, but Michelle stayed. After school, her pimp sent her to walk the track, often for hours on end.
I was living 2 different lives, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you know? That's kind of how I felt, because by day I was, like you said, going to high school, and I had to put on my happy face, you know, nothing's wrong with me. I'm just a happy girl, you know, me and my boyfriend are cool, everything's fine. And so I would have to go every day after school, just go straight to walking the track.
In some circles, Portland has become known for its underage prostitution because that's what a lot of the Johns are looking for. The girl we are calling Lauren was in her early teens.
Some guys are creepy. Some guys did actually know how old I was, and they liked that.
I used to lie and say that I was 18 because I know that some of them would get freaked out. So I'd lie and say I was 18. But some of them, you know, I just kind of get the vibe off of them. So I'd let them know my real age, and one time I let this guy know my real age. Yeah, I'm 16. And he said, "Oh, well, you're not young enough, you need to get out." And I was like, I was so desperate for money at the time that I said, well, I can put my hair in pigtails, you know, I can make myself look younger. And he didn't want it. He told me that he was looking for an 11 or 12-year-old.
You ever talk to these Johns who've had sex with a 13, 14-year-old?
Oh, yeah. They're remorseful. Most of them are really remorseful. They're just like, oh, God, I really screwed up. I'm so sorry.
And what do you say to him?
I said, get the hell out of our town. Because a lot of them come from outside of Portland. You know, my perfect world, if I was king for the day, I'd have a giant billboard on 82nd Avenue, and I'd put their picture up there and say, these guys are raping our children. And I think that same guy can come back and do it again? I don't think so.
Well, in your judgment, the buyers get off easy.
Yes, they do. That needs to be changed.
Can you arrest the John?
Oh, yeah, we can arrest them. The problem is this, you know, being there when the act occurs, and if you see and you know this girl's a juvenile, well, you can't let that act occur because you're allowing a felony to occur in front of you. You've got to stop it. But say you catch a John driving away, and you go get the little girl, and she's 16. Now you got to go to court, and you got to prove that he knew she was under 18 years old. You can arrest him for the prostitution, which is a misdemeanor and is a get out of here, don't do it again. But we had a case where a 16-year-old was picked up by an 84-year-old and were caught in the act. And we had to go to court. And he argued to the judge that he didn't know she was under 18. And so he got found guilty for the prostitution, but not the more serious felony.
Well, don't you think if buyers knew if they went out shopping and they got a kid and couldn't say, I didn't know how old she was, and they were going to get that same 10-year penalty, that they would think twice before shopping? I think that would deter buying. Now, would it stop everybody? No. But would it stop a whole lot of guys? Yes.
This year, Linda Smith helped Washington State pass one of the toughest anti-trafficking bills in the country. The bill increases monetary and jail penalties for the Johns. It also makes it impossible for them to escape prosecution by saying that they didn't know the girl was underage. But the Johns can escape Washington State's new law by simply driving down I-5 into Portland.
Oregon needs to follow Washington State. They need to increase those penalties dramatically, but they need to enforce the penalties against the buyer.
But Smith says the whole mindset has to change, where young prostitutes are viewed just like any other young victim, and Johns are viewed as molesters.
Statutory rape is built into most state laws and could be used in this case, but often the other law on arresting prostitutes overrides, so they arrest her and she never gets into the position of being a victim. And because he has given money, he's considered then involved in prostitution versus raping a child. It is just that transition of money. So really what you're telling them is, in a neighborhood, if you molest that 12, 13, 14-year-old girl, you're going to go to jail a long time. Are you the teacher or you the minister? Maybe you should just take some money and go to the truck stop, or go to Portland and go down to Deja Vu and kind of hang out there. And you can get a minor there. And as long as you give money, you're probably not going to be in trouble.
What is it about city, county, state governments, and for that matter, the federal government, they haven't awakened to this problem?
I have a million thoughts in my head right now, but I mean, who runs the country? Men. Okay? Who has sex with these kids? Men.
Never thought of it just that way.
Yeah. You see women out having sex with these little girls?
Well, you tell me.
No. Sure don't. We see probably 70% of our guys are 18 to 25. The old school.
But Sergeant Justice views these challenges as obstacles that need to be overcome. He and his team spend time educating the public about child trafficking at meetings with local businesses and school groups, like this one at the University of Portland.
You ladies in here, how many of you at 13, 14, and 15 knew what you wanted to be, had no problems with your parents, everything was just great? Raise your hand. Now imagine coming from a broken home, divorced parents, foster kid, been abused all your life, And that's no wonder these guys can target them and pick them off and do this to them. We are like the duck that's paddling like hell underwater and keeps his head stay like that. That's exactly what we are. We absolutely just stay afloat by working our asses off.
Meanwhile, nighttime means new patrols are back on the streets of Portland. This time, the cops confront another woman they think is a streetwalker. But it quickly turns into a squeeze play to get her pimp. And to do that, the police give a lesson in street economics.
How much money do you have?
Like $1,000 saved up.
Okay. You said you've been doing this for 2 months. How many nights a week are you out here?
Just a couple.
Okay, so you're making roughly $1,000 a week, correct? Is that give or take? So in the 2 months, you should have $8,000. Where is that $8,000 going?
Well, $2,000 of it went to my brother. I had a $600 cell phone bill that got paid off.
So you're using it to help yourself?
Yeah.
What's David using it for?
Basically, I just take care of him.
So you start writing it all down, and you do the math. And then you go, where's your money? Oh, well, because they don't even think about it. They see the money in their hand. They don't even realize they're giving it to them. And you just start letting them figure it out. And it's like, holy crap. I guess it's not that great.
We're going to need to take this girl back to East. She's rolling on her pimp.
Even if a girl decides to roll on her pimp, the chances they'll be able to prosecute him or get her off the streets are slim.
Here's the problem, Mr. Rather. Your evidence is your girl, okay? Your 15-year-old is your evidence. If I arrest you for stealing a car, I got the car as evidence. Or if you sell drugs, I have the dope, I can put it in an evidence locker and keep it. If you're my evidence, and then I arrest this pimp, and then you run away, which they always do, I have no case. So I have to go find you.
And then after you find this girl, this hypothetical 15-year-old girl, you find her, you bring her in, you say, you're going to be the key witness in prosecuting this guy. What happens?
She runs away because we have no facility that you can hold him in.
Believe it or not, in the United States, there are fewer than 100 beds dedicated to the rehabilitation and protection of child prostitutes. Not one of them in Portland. Across the country, rescued girls are usually locked up because no other option exists.
I remember a young kid was recovered, been reported missing to the National Center when she was 12. She was now 14 when she was rescued. A prosecutor in a state called me and said, we don't have anywhere to put her. The domestic violence shelters don't want her because they're afraid she's a risk to the other people there. The traditional child abuse groups and runaway shelters don't want her. They think she represents a high risk. I have no choice but to put her in secure detention.
Without a place to house these girls, Sergeant Justice says it's hard to watch over his victims and keep them safe. After nearly 3 years on Vice, Justice has saved only a handful of girls, and it's a record that disturbs him.
They're just kids. Like this one little girl, she wrote a note to her foster mom, I'm nothing but a whore and a drug addict. I'm not worth saving. And it eats your guts up because you want to help them so bad, and they get so close, and then they run away.
Losing a child to the streets is a horror Sue experienced firsthand. She knew her daughter was turning tricks, and she felt powerless to stop her.
There were times where, she would be out after curfew. We'd call the police. We'd have the police bring her back to us. We'd, get her away from him. She'd sneak out in the night. She'd go back to him because she loved him.
They tried everything they could think of to get her away from her pimp. They called the cops on him. They worked with Vice to build a case against him. They brought her home every time she cried for help. They thought about moving, but didn't have the money. And with every chance they had, they fought and begged her to leave him.
It finally took me realizing that I can't say anything against him because she loves him. I need to just show her I love her to finally, try to actually win her back. So one of the hardest things my husband and I ever had to do was drive her back to a motel to drop her off to stay with him. There were times that, even though it sickened me, I paid for her to have a motel room for her and him to sleep at, because I knew that if
He thought he'd seen just about everything. For the last 3 decades, he worked up the ranks, from a patrolman to undercover narcotics officer to homicide detective and then sergeant. In 2008, he was promoted to head Portland's vice detail.
Well, these are kids, okay? These are kids that are 10, 12, 13, 14 years old. It is the most troubling job I've ever done in police work. It drives me crazy. It keeps me awake at night. It kills me that these little kids are getting out here getting raped.
Well, why Portland? I mean, I'm puzzled.
Well, Portland's a very liberal city. You know, the big thing here is keep Portland weird. I don't know. You know, I really don't know. I just know that we are very liberal and we let things go, and we shouldn't. All right, this is the Dancing Bear, right here.
Sergeant Justice showed us some of the seedier sides of Portland. It's where sex can be bought on the street or in a store. It's a city where zoning is unrestricted. Here, a grade school is just across the street from a so-called efficient public transportation to every corner of the city. But there is another side to Portland, a seedier side. The city has more strip clubs per capita than Las Vegas. And with all nude shows and numerous sex stores, Portland has been dubbed Pornland. It's not surprising that where you find strip clubs and sex stores, you'll most likely find prostitutes. But what is surprising is that this model city is becoming a major center for child trafficking, juveniles being forced into selling their bodies.
It is out of control problem. It is unbelievable. I've only done this job 3 years in the vice. I've been a cop for 29. If you'd have told me 3 years ago that a 14-year-old girl would go to a food court, meet a guy, and 3 hours later be selling herself, I'd have said, no frickin' way. It happens every single day. Every day.
Sergeant Doug Justice heads the Portland Police's vice detail, which investigates all prostitution cases in the city. Tonight, child prostitution is booming in America.
Well, these are kids, okay? These are kids that are 10, 12, 13, 14 years old. It happens every single day. Every day.
Portland, Oregon is one of a growing number of hubs for children forced into the sex trade.
You need a lot of product when you have that many buyers coming to shop, and that's what Portland has become, a place for people to shop for the innocence of children of our nation.
A special report into sex trafficking and children.
I would have never thought that I would have been in this situation. I would have never thought that I would have sold myself for any other person.
We'll bring you the news tonight on Dan Rather Report. Good evening. Our report tonight may adult entertainment store. It's a city where strip mall has a whole different meaning, like here at Town Plaza.
And this entire place is in some sort of exotic strip. It's got a Video Visions that sells, you know, X-rated movies. Then they've got a dance thing in there, and then they've got this the Sugar Shack juice bar. And then you go in there and they've got little rooms with curtains on them. You can go in there and have sex.
So the Town Plaza is basically a sex plaza?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
I'd like to think I have a fair number of road miles on me, but I don't know I've ever seen, in effect, a strip mall dedicated completely to sex.
That's it.
Another reason that child prostitution has a foothold here is that Portland is a major transit hub. There's the port, freight rail, and an extensive highway system. Interstate 5 stretches north to Washington State and south to California. Other highways lead to Nevada and Arizona. Easy transit means easy trafficking, as girls are moved from place to place. They make you uneasy or uncomfortable, but it's a story that needs to be told. Each year, hundreds of thousands of adolescents are manipulated and even forced into America's illegal sex trade. It's considered by many to be modern-day slavery, and it's happening big time in a lot of places in this country, including in a city you might not expect, Portland, Oregon. As we found in our investigation, a small team of vice and patrol officers in Portland is working around the clock attempting to rescue hundreds of teenage girls who are the vulnerable victims of sex trafficking. Surrounded by rivers and majestic mountains, the picturesque city of Portland, Oregon is often referred to as a model American city. It is one of the most environmentally friendly or green cities in the United States. There are more open spaces in Portland than any other U.S. city. It's been voted one of America's most livable cities. Portland also offers clean, quiet, and energy